Expectations. That is the number one thing that you need to manage throughout your PhD to maintain a good relationship with your PhD supervisor. Now, the thing is that expectations can change over time as you progress through your PhD or your research project. So there are two places that it's very, very important to set expectations. And obviously the first one is when you first start your PhD. When you first start your PhD, you should sit down with your supervisor and have a frank discussion. Now, these academics are not going to want to have these sort of discussions. They are a little bit adverse to talking about real issues, personal issues, in my experience at least. Maybe you can prepare them with an email beforehand, just saying, I would like to talk about this, this, and this, and make sure that expectations is high on the list. You want to talk about primarily their expectations on you. When you turn up, when you leave, all of the different kind of milestones that you've got, what they expect of you as a PhD student, what they expect of you as a researcher, what they expect of you with the group. All of these things are very important. If you've got any uncertainty, ask them to lay them out sort of in a really frank fashion. Another really important expectation is what they want to be involved in without any questions. You see, these people are very, very busy. And so they are going to have their time sort of split between all these different sort of functions of their role. Importantly, they may not want to be bothered by everything that you've ever thought about. So there are some things that are non-negotiable for different supervisors. So for example, there was one supervisor of mine who wanted to be involved in the writing process all the time. So whenever I had a chapter, an idea, some tables, some graphs, I would approach them and they would want to be involved with that. If they were left out of that, they got cranky. And this will be different for different researchers. Some people will want to be involved with different elements of your work. Just make sure the expectations are laid out from the beginning. And another time that is very important for setting expectations is towards the end of your PhD. This is like the end of your second year or your penultimate, I think they call it. Is that the right term? The second to last year of your PhD, where you need to say, okay, here is what I need to finish, and this is what I need from you, because they are going to be in their kind of comfort zone of just ticking along. And this is where it really changes for you, and it needs to change for them as well. You need to know what they are willing to give to you and what they expect from you. So if they want chapters for your thesis, if they want peer-reviewed papers, if they want you to hand over certain bits of data, that's all very, very important. So checking in with expectations regularly throughout any research project with an academic means your research project is not only going to start on a good note, but it is going to continue to sort of build in a productive and professional way throughout your research project. And importantly, expectations can change. So if there's a change on their side, or you notice that they're being a bit weird for some reason, normally it's an expectation that you're not fulfilling, that they haven't communicated. So make sure you probe for those in a nice, gentle way, obviously, and then you can sort of build from there. But expectations are so important. If your relationship is strained, let me just tell you this, that it is very, very common for a strained relationship between a PhD student and a PhD supervisor. That is because there are loads of different sort of balls in the air that everyone's trying to juggle, and we're human and we get annoyed and we sort of make assumptions about what people are thinking, and we see people's actions and then we sort of put intent on those actions, and then before we even know it, we're kind of on this weird negative narrative with someone else about someone else, and they're probably on that same weird negative narrative about us. And it's just because we haven't talked about it. We haven't talked about the problem. And academia is not known for its touchy-feely, open kind of conversations. So one thing I recommend is that, you keep that communication line and open. You don't immediately just assume the worst. That was my probably biggest problem, is that if someone said no, if someone was annoyed at me, I assumed that they were absolutely sort of against me and that I needed to therefore be against them. Academia is full of egos. It's full of pressures, it's full of competition, and strained relationship can just be a symptom of all of those stressors that exist in academia. One of my favorite little tricks, and I did this throughout my PhD and postdocs and other sort of research positions, is I would tell the supervisors exactly what they needed to hear. Now, I know what they want. They want peer-reviewed papers, they want to hit key milestones, they just want an easy life. So I made sure that I didn't go with them with problems all the time, but what I sort of mentioned regularly in our meetings is updates on papers, updates on grant applications, updates on where we are relative to, different milestones that we needed to hit. And that just worked. If you can put their mind at ease for the things that they actually care about, which is primarily peer-reviewed papers, then that goes a long way to helping that relationship, because they kind of just know that, all right, this person knows what I want and we're working towards the same goals. And so I would have at least 1 or 2 slides saying, these are the papers that I'm currently writing, these are the papers that I'm planning in the future, or these are the ones that are submitted and this is where they're at, whether they're out for peer review or they've been submitted to an editor or they've been rejected 5 times, it doesn't matter. But focusing a little bit of your meetings and your conversation around the peer-reviewed paper stuff and grant applications and any other thing that really matters to your supervisor just puts their mind at ease. And once you get that narrative running in their mind, you're the person that is making things easy for them. So talk about that. Always go with solutions. I had kind of a little rule for myself, definitely during my postdocs, because I learned it during my PhD, that going to a supervisor with just problems is just not a very constructive use of either of your time. So as a PhD student and as a researcher, it's important that if you come across a problem, you just stop and you just think about a few approaches that you could use to solve that problem. The thing is that ultimately your supervisor, depending on the stage of the PhD you're in, your supervisor will have a say on which direction it goes, but at least providing them with options initially is very important. So this is the problem. These are the 3 solutions that I can kind of see that would potentially work. What do you think? That conversation is shorter, it's more productive, it feels better for everyone, and it just means that you need to actually do a little bit of work before reaching out to your supervisor. Don't just go there with problems, unless of course it's an emergency. I always used to say to the people that I was supervising, come to me if you've got any questions that are very time sensitive. I don't want people wasting time unnecessarily, but if it is a problem that you can just solve on your own, and then before acting, just double check with your supervisor, then that is a really great way to build that relationship. Take a mentoring mindset into every single meeting you have. It was something that I didn't do enough early on, and the relationships with my PhD supervisors in the end were strained, I think. I went in too combative. Go in and actually kind of write down what they're saying. Go check out my other video where I talk about how to take constructive criticism in academia, because it is one of the toughest things. Academics love picking each other's ideas and research to pieces, and you just have to kind of get used to that. That kind of mentored mindset, or the mentor mindset, just means that you are open. Your mind is open to absorb this information. You're not jumping and attacking on everything they say. You just write it down. You let it kind of, just be a thing. It's not good or bad. It just is. And you just write it down. And then you kind of don't try to judge whether or not it's because you're doing a bad job or because, there's something fundamentally wrong with your approach. You just kind of allow the information into your mind and your world, and you can kind of synthesize it a little bit later. But yeah, you may not like what they say. You just have to accept it without fighting. And I didn't do that. I just decided to take offense, apparently. It may seem silly, but be punctual. I have meetings where I've turned up and the person has had me waiting, and it just doesn't really seem like they respect my time. I actually had one instance when I was a postdoc where a PhD student wanted to have a meeting with me, and I said, sure, be at my office at this time. It was in the morning sometime, not particularly early, and they didn't show up. They didn't respond to emails, and so I just got on with my day. And I saw them later on that day, and I said, where were you this morning? And they were like, I was just a bit tired, and I didn't come in. And I was like, That's no good. I just didn't know what to say. I was like, their brutal honesty of being like, well, you're not important enough really to get up and turn up to a meeting. So yeah, I just stayed in bed. And I was like, oh, like they didn't even sort of like send me an email to say that they weren't turning up. And so just that kind of like simple level of turning up a little bit early to the meeting, that will be a huge kind of indicator to the supervisor that you at least respect their time, and it can sort of be the foundation on which respect grows. But yeah, just turn up when you say you're going to turn up to the meeting. Make sure that if you are organizing a meeting that you turn up to the room beforehand and you prepare stuff, you got your slides up so that they can come in, just sit down, listen to the information. All of those little tiny details just really help the relationship. It's really important that you're interested in their work. Now, it may sort of sound a little bit silly, but when you're working on a research project for a very long time, you can start to hate your work. It's like a Stockholm syndrome where you're kind of trapped by your work and you kind of hate it, but you also kind of grow to love it. And so the supervisor feels this as well, but on like an extreme level. They've been doing this for decades maybe. And so having someone that's just a little bit interested in the research they're doing really helps brighten up the day. And you may feel negative about your work. Well, you definitely will feel negative about your work at some point. But making sure your supervisor isn't the person that you sort of like vent that to is going to be so sort of important in just keeping the conversation around you as a researcher positive in their mind. But don't allow your supervisor to become the person that you complain about your research to, because that won't help the relationship at all. I've seen it happen. I've had it happen to me. And you're like, well, this is the career I chose. Sorry. So there we have it. There's everything you need to know about maintaining a good professional relationship with your supervisor. Let me know in the comments what you would add. Is there anything else that is a must for your PhD supervisor relationship? Let me know. Also, there are more ways that you can engage with me. Firstly, go to academiainsider.com. That's my project where I've got my ebooks, the Ultimate Academic Writing Toolkit, as well as the PhD Survival Guide. And also, I have my Insider Forum. Also, if you want to get more free stuff from me, sign up to my newsletter at andrewstapleton.com.au/newsletter. Link is in the description. When you sign up, you'll get 5 emails over about 2 weeks, everything from the tools I use, the podcasts I've been on, how to write the perfect abstract, and more. It's exclusive content available for free, well, for your email address, but it's worth it. No spam, I guarantee it. And I'll see you in the next video.